I see we've got at least 9 people on the call. Some of you guys are muted, cameras off. So hopefully we'll hear from you. Start thinking about your questions. Obviously, it can be outside of the topic for tonight. Your questions never have to be on the topic. Our objective is to be helpful to this group in any entrepreneurial questions and how we can help further your objectives. And just remember, oftentimes your question will help somebody else. So if you've got something on your mind, don't hesitate to push it out, ask it. And if you don't want to ask it live, you can just put it in the chat and one of us will read it when it comes along. So I wanted to start with, I've got 2 quotes in front of me. I think it's fun to throw some quotes out there. I remember when I was much younger, they were always inspiring, and sometimes you get away from quotes and you go back to them like, wow, yeah, that made a lot of sense. So the first one is, they always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself, right? And that goes along with what we've talked a lot about here. That was by Andy Warhol, by the way. But it goes along with a lot of what we've said here, and we have to be the action, okay? Rod and I can only give you the tools to do what you want to do or what you're asking us how to do. But at some point, the rubber has to hit the road, and those are your actions. I love that quote. I just found it in a minute before the call, but that makes so much sense. You actually have to change them yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. So keep that in mind. So speaking of which, tonight's session is on training. It's our training, our core value of train. And the topic is conflict management. Rod kind of lobbed that up there a couple of weeks ago that's what I was going to be speaking on. And Rod, by the way, thanks for covering last week. It was my wife's birthday and we went to Nashville, and I was literally getting on a plane when this call was starting. So thanks for covering. I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I really appreciate your partnership and your willingness to step in. So my second quote is, when our actions are based on good intentions, our soul has no regrets. And that's Anthony Douglas Williams. I don't know who the hell that is, but I like that quote, because if we're doing good, we can't regret the good that we're doing. And I apply that to business more now than I ever have. When you're trying to sell something or buy something, and or just do your job, and you're doing good and you have good intentions, if the deal goes south, you'll never regret it, or you'll understand that it isn't necessarily of your fault, but maybe of the other side's. Maybe they had ill intentions, right? So if tonight's on conflict management, part of conflict management is mitigating that conflict, doing what you can so that we're not dealing with a conflict, right? And so it's important to lay that up front, always doing a good job. And so I've broken the discussion tonight out in 3 parts: external, which we'll talk about first, internal, and in those 2, I'm referring to our business minds, and then finally, just a touch of personal, because that also plays a role in our conflict management. And if you're thinking, what does conflict have to do with me being an entrepreneur, right? Well, it has everything to do with it, because there's so many personalities in the world. There's so many personalities just on this call alone. And I know outside of just Rod and I, a lot of us are looking to get into our first business deal with somebody else, or we're in the middle of a business deal, or we're at the tail end of that business deal. And how do you resolve the potential conflicts of that deal? And, like we talked about 2 weeks ago with Fred, he's talking about getting a deal with a friend. He's been screwed over a few times, and he's going, hey, how do I avoid that? Well, if you can think about all the potential conflicts in advance and flush them out, then you can deal with that on the front end of your partnership as an entrepreneur, whether that's a partnership with your banker, an investor, or the person that's going to be by your side doing the labor, right? All the forethought to avoid that conflict down the road is really important. And by the way, the advice I gave to Fred offline was, we want to do the fun stuff in business. We want to go out and sell or build or create. Wayne's got some rental properties, to go in there and clean them up and get that first renter in there, that Airbnb, making some money. But the hard stuff is the back end systems, or how you've established your relationship with your partner. And that means hiring an attorney, having them draft up the proper documents to be in a partnership with somebody. Or maybe you're long-term established, maybe it's a family business. And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, things have changed. We didn't lay the foundation out, right? And you have that conflict. So it really is about doing the not so fun stuff to avoid that conflict down the road. So again, my advice to Fred was, hey, spend the money on the attorney. If that's your biggest investment to date is the attorney, that could be your best investment. Because if you wind up having a frayed partnership in the first year or two, and by the way, I've had a few of those. I've lost partners within the first year because we didn't look at all the things that we'd be going through together. The money with the attorney, by the way, in one of my recent business deals 4 years ago, if I hadn't put the money up front with the attorney, it could have got ugly real fast, right? So that could be your biggest investment to avoid a conflict, right? So to kind of continue on this external conflict management, if you do have a business, or maybe you're building out your business plan, build into your business plan. And by the way, tonight's going to have a number of cliches in it, things that you heard before, but maybe you just put them off to the side because you didn't really believe them or you didn't care enough about them to incorporate them into your own business. But here's one I know we've all heard. The customer is always right. The customer is always right. Build that into your business plan. You will avoid 99% of all your conflicts with your customers if they arise, okay? Because the cost of you to make that customer right is far less than the damage that could be caused with that mentality of we're right, we're the one providing the service or the product or et cetera. Customer's always right. And I always think back to an exaggerated scenario of that was when I was working for In-N-Out. And one of the In-N-Out stores I worked at was by the LA County Fairgrounds. If you've ever been to the fair, and by the way, the fair's in town up here in Montana, fairs have what they call carnies. And carnies are the workers that run these fairs, and they go from town to town around the country. And we'd always say, oh, the carnies are in town. Well, what that really meant to us, and I'm not pigeonholing these types of people that they're at all the fairs, so don't take this the wrong way, but there was a lot of gypsies that worked at the fair. They were the carnies. And I'm old enough to say this was in the 80s. Wayne, you weren't even born yet. But the carnies would come in and they were gypsies. And we knew that they would try to trick us out of free food. Literally, they every time they came to town, they'd try to trick us out of free food. Now, if you know anything about In-N-Out Burger, a lot like some high quality restaurant chains, customers always right. And what they would do is they would go to pay for their food and they'd give us a 10 and we'd give them change for the 10. And then they would drop the change and go, hey, you didn't give me all my change back, right? And you're like, no, I gave it to you. And they're like, no, I gave you a 20. You're like, what? So they were always tricking us and we knew it. But the In-N-Out philosophy was the customer was always right. And so we quickly gave them the change that they were desiring to have and moved them out of the way. And we were able to serve the next customer, right? So we didn't sacrifice our great service for all the customers in line behind the person that's trying to rip us off, right? Even though we knew they were bad. And like I said, that's an exaggerated example. But if you look at the story of In-N-Out and the success that In-N-Out's had, it's a multi-billion-dollar privately held restaurant business since 1948. Clearly, they're doing something right. And one of those right things is the customer is always right. So when you look to build your business plan or the business that you're in currently, really put a focus on how you treat your customers and how you evaluate any conflicts you may have with them. Because I could see your face, Wayne, you're going to be my target here. Thank you, by the way. Wayne's got a new Airbnb business, right? And he's going to be taking in customers, and people are going to be staying there, and maybe they took advantage of his hospitality and his freshly rebuilt, remodeled venue. And there's certainly going to be conflict that arises there, but how he deals with that will also be how he gains referrals or not for future customers, right? And how he's planned in advance to resolve those conflicts with those potential customers. So like in my case, just a quick thought about that, right? I would actually have a little budget set aside for cleanup and repair for those customers that aren't so good. Because for every bad one, there's probably 10 great ones that clean up the place better than when they got there, right? So if I was building a new business plan, I would definitely build in my budget a space for the customer being right, whatever that might look like for in your business. By the way, I see Raquel's on here now, and I'm not going to call her out, but I do want to congratulate her. She had a very successful event with William Shatner. It was on Fox TV, had a big event with the police department at the museum. And I'm just so proud of her for what she's accomplished. So great job, Raquel. I saw some of the videos and stuff posted up.
Thank you.
Yeah. The other side on conflict management is just give better service, right? Just give better service in whatever you're doing, and place a focus and an emphasis on what that service looks like. Because again, let's just say you're short staffed, you got a restaurant, you're short staffed, and people maybe they're waiting longer for their food or to be seated, but you're giving good service once they do get seated. People are going to be more forgiving, and you won't receive that conflict of an angry customer because they realize, wow, these guys are really working their tail off. They're shorthanded, but man, they're working their butt off. They're doing everything they can to give me the best service possible. I know the country's upside down right now, and there's not enough employees for anything. I see them working hard. So give better service a part of your conflict management as it relates to your external customers. It's important. And then another quote, I didn't write down who the author was, but it says, so much depends on your reputation. Guard it with your life. Guard it with your life. We're talking about your reputation. And I can go back to that same In-N-Out Burger scenario. Company's been around since 1948. Everybody knows the quality, the friendliness, and the service that company offers. Their reputation precedes themselves, right? I just had my brother here for 4 days. He was the CEO for that company for 35 years. They had 30,000 employees. They expanded from California to Texas to Northern Utah, Oregon, et cetera. Big company, you get the idea. Well, when they moved to Texas, they had their bakery that made their buns for them to their recipe, their formula, whatever. They also made buns for other people. And he just told me this story the other day, and it makes a lot of sense what I'm talking about, this reputation thing, is they got a batch of buns in their Texas stores, and I think they had a dozen or more, and realized that the buns were what they call sour. So in the process of the dough rising, there's a yeast involved in that, and sometimes it can come off as sour. Doesn't mean you can't eat them, just means they don't taste as good as they normally should. And my brother made the executive decision to send buns from California to Texas as fast as they could, but can only drive them there so quickly. So while they waited, they shut down every store in the state. Shut down, closed the doors. Now, other companies like Whataburger and Burger King, whatever, that use buns from the same bun, factory, they stayed open. They didn't care. They didn't care if the buns had a sour yeast taste to them. They're there to make money. And my brother said, the value that we receive from that, you could never pay for. And here's the lesson. Their reputation coming to a new state, maybe it's a new city, maybe it's a new part of town, their reputation was that they placed an emphasis on quality. The second they had an opportunity to prove that with these buns, they shut down because they did not want the quality to suffer in their customers' minds. Probably cost them millions of dollars to shut down all those stores for a day, but it was worth saving their reputation. So back to the quote, so much depends on your reputation, guard it with your life. And that's what guarding it with your life looks like in this In-N-Out example. Okay, I'm going to move on from the external conflict management and move into the internal conflict management. And when I say internal, this is within your company. This is within your partners or your executives. And the first thing I wrote down in my own notes was cut the draggers. Cut the draggers. It's a line I've used for a long time. Typically it's for my personal relationships, but cut the draggers. We put out so much energy and effort towards our businesses as entrepreneurs. We've hopefully given it everything we've got. And if you've got draggers in your business, whether that's co-partners or executives, people that work for you, the lowest level employee, if they're not pulling their weight or doing what you've hired them to do or partnered with them to do, my recommendation is cut the dragger, because the longer you've got that in your life there, you're creating a ball of conflict, right? You're creating a ball of conflict because all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm doing all this and they're not doing their part, especially if you've done your homework and you've created an agreement between the two of you that they're not following through on, or you've hired an employee and they're not doing what they've committed to do for you, right? So I'm a quick to cut the draggers person, right? That if they're not bringing me value to value here, and my ship could be sinking because of them, cut the dragger. And by the way, it's probably the toughest conversation you'll have in business is when you realize something doesn't work, even if it's an employee. When going back to an In-N-Out example, or even the ski resort that I worked at, ski resort, I had 300 employees. The biggest store I ran an In-N-Out, I had over 100. I think it was 110. It hurts to let somebody go, to pull them into the office and say, well, we're going to have to let you go. Even if I didn't like the person because they've chipped away at my soul for so long, it's never pleasant to let somebody go. But by cutting the draggers, it gives you the capacity to give other people more of yourself, more of your business, more attention in a positive way than being so focused on fixing the problem from the dragger and what they're not giving you, right? Infection is to avoid the unhappy or the unlucky, right? And I akin that to the story of the drowning man, right? If you've ever taken any lifeguard courses, first thing or scuba diving, which I did so many years ago, if somebody's drowning, I don't care who it is, even if it's a toddler, they tell you, don't swim out to them and try to save them. Throw them a lifeline instead, because that drowning man will pull you under and probably drown you both, right? So when you look at that as a business and conflict management, unhappy and unlucky could be the infection of your business. Unlucky could be a little bit of a stretch, but I think everybody can get the idea. You're around people like, man, that is the most unlucky person I've ever been around. Well, maybe there's a condition there, or how they perceive their role in life to be that person in your business. So again, cut the draggers, avoid the drowning man, right? And usually that comes in the form of the unhappy, the unlucky, or the dissatisfied. Maybe they don't know what their values are and they're just there to be there, okay? I also like to say internally, be honest and tell the truth in a positive way. And by doing that, that's also going to avoid the conflict internally, right? If you've got a situation with whether it's a partner or an employee, if you're honest with them, you can avoid the conflict with them. And again, that requires your own ability to sit down with somebody and say, hey, by the way, I really wanted to talk to you about this because I think this could grow into something more and it could be a problem for us down the road. And those conversations aren't fun, but they're important. And they could be critical to the success of what you're doing, to sit down and have that conversation, right? So again, I like to say, let's be honest and tell the truth in a positive way. All right. Another thing, by the way, I'm pulling some of this content from a book that I read years ago. It's called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And what's interesting about this book, I think I read it 20 plus years ago. What's interesting about this book is it's starting to show up again in bookstores. Greene has come out with a couple other books about life and relationships and things like this. This is more through business. But you know, I was just looking at one of his chapters, which is law number 9, and it's win through your actions, never through argument, right? And what I love about this is it goes back to what I said at the beginning of this discussion from that quote that I read is, you know, we can talk a lot about what we should and could be doing, but there's nothing more important than just doing it. And oftentimes when you're in conflict with somebody, it's better to show them that you're willing to put in the work, or you're willing to resolve, or you're willing to go above and beyond that maybe that conflict has arisen from, because it's tough to argue with actual actions and doing, right? So allow your work oftentimes to speak for yourself. And sometimes you can avoid the conflict altogether from a verbal perspective, right? Because, you know, oftentimes when you confront somebody, it turns into more of a problem, right? But you can outwork that sometimes as well. So I've given you 2 options: sit somebody down, have the tough conversation, or analyze the situation and say, is this something that can be diffused by me putting in more effort or more work, or just continuing to be the person that I am and proving to them that, you know, I'm not the issue here, right? So I love that resolve in the 48 laws of power. All right, I'm going to go about 5 more minutes, and I'm going to start taking some questions on this. You know, again, a lot of cliches and conflict. Here's a great lesson in business, and I've used this recently 4 years recently. When you're in your 50s, 4 years is recent, right, Rod? When I was going through my divorce, I was given some advice. And that advice was, be the kindest, gentlest, nicest person you can in the process. I thought, no, man, I want out. I'm out of here. Like there's a reason why this is happening, right? But I really thought about that. I thought, you know what? For me, that's the Christian thing to do. It's the right thing to do. I understand the circumstances. I'm going to be that person. And I will tell you, on the other side of that, 10 years on the other side of it now, is I'm so happy that I took that route, that I was that person in the process, because I have never regretted it. I know I did the right thing. I know I gave more than I should have, offered more than I should have. And by the way, that person took less than they could have and should have, right? And I know that's a harsh reality example, but the reality is I was the kindest, gentlest, nicest person in the process. So fast forward to that conflict I suggested I had with one of my businesses 4 years ago. I took the same approach. I say, hey, look, I know this isn't working out for you. I can tell you're unhappy. And he had a conflict to resolve himself. He needed to focus on other endeavors because our partnership was weighing heavily on his time that he didn't actually have. He thought he had, but he didn't, right? And by the way, it was a major irritant for me because I was relying on his partnership to be successful. But instead of getting angry with it, I said, look, let me buy you out. Okay. I completely understand your situation. Let me buy you out. And here's how we'll go about doing that. And by the way, I'm going to support your decision by supporting your old business that you've got to go back to. And even in my book, I mentioned his business a couple of times in effort to support. So several years later, I even continued to give kudos and love to this breakup that should have been a major conflict, right? So in your personal life, in the personal way that you deal with things, my recommendation is and advice is to be the kindest and gentlest person you can be. You'll never regret it. And maybe you come out on the short end of that stick, but you're all young enough to make up for that elsewhere, and you won't regret how you've treated somebody potentially in the process. So it's probably the best piece of advice I can give you in this entire scenario today. So in a nutshell, that's conflict management. Again, it's one of those ugly topics that we often try to avoid, but my recommendation is face it head on, get after it sooner than later, cut the draggers, or have those tough conversations that you need to have, or outwork and outpace the situation so you don't have to deal with it, or you can prove that you're doing the right thing through your actions, right? So, all right, start throwing up your questions. Raquel, Rod gave you a nice work as well if you didn't see that. Rod, do you want to comment on conflict management?
Yeah. First, thanks, Jim, because it's always such a good reminder to hear what we should be doing and what we need to be doing constantly. And as you're talking, I'm going backward in time, right? And I'm thinking, oh, I could have handled that situation better, right? You know, even though it's years behind me, I can see where I could have made better choices, done things differently and better in the past. So I mean, that's the first thing. The stories that you used to illustrate this were just spot on. One thing I'm going to throw out there, this is going to be my tip for anybody, and this happened in retail, but you said customer is always right. And as a business person, that can be the internal conflict we have within ourselves when we know that we're being scammed or we know that we're right, but you know, again, having it spelled out ahead of time how you're going to handle that conflict makes all the difference. But there are ways you can insulate yourself from some of that. And not every situation would be like that. And this is a retail example, but it could work in wholesale as well. And that is, you know, lessen the impact of the negative thing that you know is going to happen. We would have people come in with $200 pair of boots, for example, and there would be nothing wrong with them, but you know, maybe an eyelet popped out or something. I could take it to a cobbler and put a new eyelet in for $2, but they're upset because it's $200, didn't want to do it. So, you know, I would just reason with people and say, well, look, you know, I have to send this back to the manufacturer. You know, we're a small business. This is going to hurt us. They're probably only going to allow me 50% based on the wear on the thing. What if I gave you that toward a brand new pair of boots? You know, you've had this for a year and a half, don't even have the receipt anymore. Sometimes people will just say, okay, that sounds better than nothing. I thought I was going to get nothing, right? And then I would always send it back to the manufacturer because I had a great relationship with all of my suppliers and I never took advantage of it. And I just say, is there something we can do here? And it was amazing. They had the same attitude. They wanted to keep me happy. You know, I was their customer too, but I never took advantage. You know, it was always something, what can we work out here? So, you know, it's on the front end, yeah, you've got to deal with it straight up, straight on, but it doesn't mean that you can't save some face and save some money, right? And that's what I was attempting to do, save some money at the same time, because ultimately we're responsible for the bottom line and our other partners also. So that was just one example, but it really made me think about all the opportunities and missed opportunities that those of us in different kinds of businesses face all the time. So again, thanks, Jim. Great job, great reminders.
Yeah, I'm going to shift gears on a couple things as the group formulates some questions. And if we don't get a bunch of questions, we'll end early, and hopefully you guys gain some value from conflict management training. A couple months ago or a month ago, I mentioned that I started reading Ed Milet's The Power of One More book. And I've got usually 2 or 3 books going on at the same time. I know Rod does too, different topics, whether it's politics or business or just for pleasure. And so I finally wrapped this book up. And there's a lot of value in this book, and I would highly recommend people grab it. I know that there is some strategies in here that I'm going to employ in my own life, whether that's personal or business. There was some great reminders. One of the things that I really love about this book is his values are expressed in this book without question of what would happen if he shared his values. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've talked about values often. To me, it's the foundation of everything I do is what my values are. Ed Milet, I think if you looked him up online, he's worth 100 million plus. He's a very successful real estate entrepreneur. He has one of the top, if not the top no, he's not the top podcast because that's Joe Rogan, but he's always in the top 5. And he's been doing it for a really long time. He's got some of the greatest guests. Now, I'm not here to preach to you, but most of you know that one of my values is my Christianity and my faith in God. That's my top priority. I don't often expect that to bleed through in somebody's work like Ed Milet. Okay. And Ed dedicated the entire second to last chapter to his faith in his God and his belief system and how important it is to have that. And I just thought, wow, what an incredible message that not only resonated with me, but I always think about, what are the effects of that message and what happens when you throw it all out there to your customers or to the public, right? And so I was just impressed that Ed stuck to his value in his book, that I know he's spending tons of money to market and push out, and he's got a number of events around that. So kudos to Ed, and I would also suggest you grab the book if you can. Let's see, a couple questions. Any specific resource you could point to when it comes to partnering up with somebody? Book, blog, website, attorney. Russell, I'm working on an attorney for business structure. So if you're going to work with somebody from a structure perspective, I had a great attorney up until last year and he retired, so I don't have one anymore for structure. But it's important when it comes to those operating agreements and how you build out that structure. If I get one that I like, there's one I'm chasing that I like from years ago. I need to find out if he's still working, and I'll refer that back. When it comes to partnering with somebody, you said book, blog, website. Here's the reality. I think that you need to understand what's important to you first. We've talked a little bit about this, what your values are, so that if you're aligned with your partner. No book's going to tell you if you guys are a fit, if you mesh. When I met Rod, it was only after, I met him, in social circles, but it was only after sitting down with him and reading his book that I realized our values were so closely aligned that we would be a good fit if we could build a business model around that. The values weren't in question. And even today, we had to make a big decision together about our business today. And all of our values were right there. The only thing that was a conflict on my side was my own selfishness on something, which was my time, by the way, not money. And we worked through it, right? So no book or website's going to tell you that. But Russell, I'd also encourage you, if you want to have a conversation with me specifically about what you're looking at or thinking about, please feel to connect with me. Happy to give you the time. I can send you a calendar link so that you can jump on that, right? Sean, thank you for the compliment. I'm really happy to have you on the call. Been waiting for you. And you could expect a lot more of this. We hope to stimulate thought and get it going. Sean, if you don't mind, can you type in the link, the company that you work for, the Brave Books, because I love it. And if you've got kids, Wayne, I know you've got kids. Clay's not on the call. He's got a bunch of kids. I love the company that Sean works for. So if you don't mind, thank you. Bravebooks.us. I thought it would be transparent and share just one of my own little struggles right now, because I don't want people to think that life is easy. No matter how things are perceived, we all struggle. And I think Raquel told me one of the reasons why she really wanted to get in the group is because I said, life is fucking hard, right? It's how we handle it. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's how we handle our struggles and come out of that on the other side. It's not easy, but oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we're used to tackling problems, and it becomes part of our DNA that, okay, here comes a problem. Let me solve that and move past it and keep focused on what my vision is, what my goals and objectives are. But life is always hard. Okay. Doesn't necessarily get easy. It's how we approach them. So right now, like I mentioned, I went to Nashville with my wife for a vacation. I had company when I got back. They left. I had company arrive the night that they left. They just left. So for 10 days, my life has been completely disrupted. And it might not seem important from an entrepreneurial perspective, but my training program to go race this Spartan race in September is completely out the window. And, what does that mean to me? Well, I have a trainer that every single day, if I don't accomplish what he's mapped out for me to do, that means that my running program and my capacity reduces and I get out of sync with the program. So I had to make the decision to delay that particular race and enter a different race a month later. Right. So my life's been disrupted, which has disrupted my goals and objectives for the year. And, I have my own internal disappointments over that. And I beat myself up over it, and that affects how I approach my business in the morning. Like, I can't do this. So now I'm upset about that. So none of our lives are perfect. It's how we deal with it. And I think the message that I wanted to give you is that tomorrow's another day. I don't have to give up on this goal and this race that I've set out to do. I can approach it again tomorrow and start fresh with my program and where I need to be tomorrow. And instead of giving up, just get back in it, right? And I want to encourage you guys in the group is if you're feeling conflicted or let down, you feel like you've let yourself down because you're not on track with what your goals are, what you want to be doing, tomorrow's another day. Just get after it tomorrow. Don't give up entirely because you've had a rough go, right? Raquel says, keep focused. That's the key, right? She's right. That's the key. So get back after it tomorrow, pick up the pieces and get going instead of, going down that hard left turn and keep going, right? All right, Eric, how and what's the best way to discuss about percentage in a company when having a partner? Great question. Okay. I talked to your potential partner about this. And this is how I feel. There's no secret to what I'm going to say right now for you, Eric. And I'd say the same to anybody else. You need to have an equal exchange of value in what you're doing. Okay. An equal exchange of value, because if you don't, then what's going to happen is that'll erode away at your partnership down the road. Okay. So let's just say, okay, I'm going to put the money up and you're going to put the labor up. We'll use that as an example because that's pretty common in business deals. One guy has the skill, the other guy has the money. You like each other enough, we're going to get together and do this business. It happens more than you think. Matter of fact, that's the same scenario with investors, right? You've got a skill set, you've got an idea, but you don't have the money. Investor comes in and all of a sudden you've got a partnership. Where most people make a mistake in those type of partnerships is they place too much value on one thing or the other, and you have an unequal balance in the partnership. And because of that unequalness, fast forward down the road, all of a sudden you say, wow, I'm doing all the work. They just put in the money and I've got 20 people over here willing to give me the money, right? Then you start to have this resentment, or the opposite. You're down the road, you put in all the money and you're like, this guy was supposed to be doing all the work. Now he's slacking off. He's not doing half the work he used to do. Now the money's pissed off, right? So what you need to do is find that middle ground so that you have equal partnerships from the get-go, okay? And then you build off of that, right? Now, if there's a controlling factor that you feel needs to be in place, that's where it's great to have a third party or a board member, so you structure, let's just say you have a basic LLC, have a board where there's 3 people, okay? You and your partner, and then pick a third person, non-biased, that maybe you pay them a small stipend to be a board member that you get advice from, and they can also be that tiebreaker on decisions in the company. Okay, so you really need to, and this is where I said, invest in the legal side of a partnership and what that percentage looks like. Okay, and here's another critical factor, something that I learned in my last deal, which made it so much easier from a legal perspective, is just because I have a history of issues with investors doesn't mean that my next deal should reflect those same issues. That's my baggage. It's not my new partner's baggage, right? So I can't put that baggage on that person, right? And vice versa, right? If somebody has baggage that they're bringing to the table, then you have to understand in their mind what their biggest concern is, like, hey, I've gotten screwed here before. I don't want it to happen here again. So as that person's potential partner, you need to be understanding of that and offset that with something that works the best for your relationship and moving forward, right? So, Eric, what little I know about your business, I think you've got a great opportunity. I think you got a great opportunity for a partner, but I really feel like you guys, all the work needs to be up front on this deal to make sure that you guys have mapped that out and you both feel equally yoked in your relationship and the deal. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question.
I'm gonna jump in here real quick, Jim, too. You just raised two great points, and the first is communication, and communication up front is key. But that communication has to be tied into your structure. Even your business plan should, you should communicate about the business plan and then the structure of the LLC. And then as far as that equal value thing, and every business is different, so you really have to separate those things. As in my last business, my partner wanted to be a silent partner and just invest the money, but then he wanted more. And it's like, well, wait a second. So I kept all the intellectual property. That was part of our agreement. All the trademarks are mine. They're my personal trademarks. They're not part of that partnership, although they're integral to it. So, I mean, but that was equal value because, that was something that was my creation, and I wanted that, and I wanted to keep that component. So, it's just a matter of sitting down and talking about it, and then making sure that you put it in writing so that there's no confusion with it. And you're right, Jim. Things like hanging onto your own baggage, don't bring that onto the new deal. Old baggage is old baggage. It should just be a lesson at that point, not part of a new structure.
Well, and I just feel like that was your dummy tax that you paid, and it shouldn't be part of the new structure because you want to get the new structure off on the right foot. And by the way, people, this goes with vendors that you're working with. It goes with potential clients or business relationships. Maybe you align yourself with a marketing company. Like we have with Sunday Brunch. You got to make sure that your partnerships make a lot of sense up front, because if they don't, they're never really going to work, and you don't want to go away sour down the road, and then you're always goes back to that conflict management, right? So it's interesting because a lot of things that we talk about revolve around the importance of communication, right? The importance of communication and really laying down those elements, because traditionally we're poor communicators. We don't want to have those tough conversations and, trying to figure out what's best. So we allow things to slip under the cracks, and it's those things that will be your worst enemies, and again, and I'll use this because we got some time. Rod and I have been asked, they sought us out to teach this course to a high school. And when we built out this curriculum, we thought what a wonderful goal it would be to have is to teach our youth how to become entrepreneurs and give them hope beyond just that college lane that everybody wants them to go in, right? So all of a sudden we have an opportunity to teach a class a couple days a week at a local high school and bring the exact value that we talked about in our business plan to these kids, right? And the pay will be there. It's probably nowhere near where we'd like to be paid, just being honest, but that's okay because it aligns with our values 100%. But what I said to Rod today is I said, look, I got to be transparent with you. I haven't worked for a person for 10 plus years. Like I create my own schedule and do what I want when I want, and Rod listened and he said, well, if we were aligned with our goals and our values, which we are in this, then that shouldn't really matter. And we've already talked about covering each other's back and being good partners for one another. And I realized, hey, you know what I was saying was more selfish focused than business and value focused, right? So I had to get beyond my own selfish needs and look more at the business that we created and the reasons why we created. And he reminded me, hey, once you get in the door, you realize the value that comes back to you from doing what you love. And, so anyways, I think it's good to give live examples of real conversations that happen in business. And that was something that we talked about this morning. It wasn't on the conflict level, but it was on, hey, we should have a conversation, man. I got a hard time being attached to a schedule all of a sudden, right? So anyways, all right. Any more comments, questions?
What's up, guys?
Hey, Wayne.
You guys hear me? What's
Yeah.
happening?
We're good.
All right, I'm live. You guys can all hear me? All right. So this kind of goes back to a lot of you guys don't know me, but I had ran a pool service for a while, and time conflict is kind of like a big thing to me. So would basically saying like cutting the draggers as being like a customer as well, because sometimes I would spend so much time trying to keep a customer happy and right that I would lose time to go do something else or be on, something like that. So would that be something like, I don't really know what my question is, but is that like a good thing to do? Like, can you cut your customers to create create your conflict not happening or whatever?
Well, it's a good question, right? So my example was fast food because that's my life, right? And in that world, you don't really cut customers. But what I know about you and your business is that you offer a service and you have more of an intimate relationship with your customers. You have access to their backyards, you have access to their pools, and maybe family members. And what happens in your world is that you're delivering, by the way, you've helped me before, so I know the level of service you give. You're delivering a superior product in a world that you're really kind of forced to pick and choose what fits, who you are and what your days consist of. And I think in those scenarios, sometimes you do have to pick and choose your customers. It might cost you some money because they're not a good fit for your business model, right? And that's where we talk about sometimes sacrificing a little bit to bring your business to where it needs to be, right? So I don't know the whole story there, but what you have to look at is like, am I cutting a customer because I want to go hang out with my family because that's higher on the priority totem pole? Am I cutting this customer because my service is suffering with 3 other customers, because this particular customer is a big problem in my daily schedule? Or do you look at it and say, I got to put this customer on Fridays because it's the only job I can do on Friday. But if I'm going to spend that kind of time with them, I need to charge them the appropriate rate, right? So there is circumstances where you need to cut the draggers, which could be bad customers. And I've done that before in different businesses. Well, I'm in the alcohol business. I've cut customers out of who we would sell to because they didn't align with my values and how they did things, right? I've cut consulting clients. Actually, this is one I could be a little bit more transparent with. I was hired to consult for a cannabis company up in Salinas, big dollars, big cash dollars, to help them convert from the black market, illegal market, to the legal market, which was the right thing to do. And I felt good about, okay, I'm going to help somebody become legal now that it's legally allowed. And I was there for 3 months, helping them, putting systems in place. And they decided that the systems were fine. I'd done the job. They offered me continued work, but they weren't going to go legal. And I decided, you know what? That's not worth my reputation. It's not worth who I am, what my values stand for. So I walked away from that job because they weren't a good customer for me and everything else that I was doing, right? So probably a long way to answer your question. I think you need to look at what your objectives are in your business and really evaluate if it's the right customer for you or not. And I wouldn't feel bad about it if it didn't align with your values and your business objectives. All right, Rod, go for it, buddy.
Yeah, I just want to respond to that too. I'm going to take it right back to your lesson tonight, which was be honest and tell the truth in a positive way. And if that customer is a valuable customer, you've had them for a long time, just say, look, for whatever reason, if it's costing quality with other customers, et cetera, then just tell them that. And I can't, maybe I'm not the best fit for you, but I will be happy to find you another pool service that might be. Offer a way out, because you still want other referrals, you still want your reputation to be intact. So how you cut it is probably more important than if you cut or not cut. It's how you do it that will make you feel better.
Yeah, great advice, Rod. Really good point, right? Because, and I've done that before in the alcohol industry, is that they might not be a fit anymore, but it's how you leave. Because look at me 10 years later, I've got a rum in my portfolio now. I've got wine in my portfolio now. I'm talking about putting whiskey in my portfolio. they might be a better fit for those products, you know, and if I left them appropriately on good terms because I was honest, they might be a phone call that I can make again. So, okay. Well, let me remind everybody that Rod and I are here for you guys. If you need us, we're happy to take your calls. We both have Calendly now. You can jump on our calendar and schedule some time, and we can help you throughout the week if you need it. You know, we'll do that as long as we can, as long as we don't have too many members, to give everybody fair time and attention. And it's what we're doing this for. But like I said in the beginning of this call, if you don't put the action in place, these calls are going to be worthless to you. And there would be nothing more dissatisfying for one, but I'd be really disappointed knowing that you have these tools or these insights or this information, then that you're not going to utilize it in your business endeavors or whatever it is that you've joined this group for, right? So I'm calling you out to make sure that you're putting these lessons into action. Okay, put them into action, even if it's the smallest thing tonight or tomorrow morning. Get on track, put these things, you know, use the tools that we've gotten and put them into action. So that's what I've got. Looks like Rod is up next week, right? Rod, you're doing, looks like coaching, right? Let me see if I got that right. Yeah, coaching, train. What is it, Rod? Do you know?
Yeah. So what we're doing next week, 8/29, Relentless Never Quit. It actually shows you on there, but we may even do a little tag team next week. So it's going to be fun. And then just a reminder that Labor Day, we will not be hosting a call. So quick heads up, we'll remind you again next week. I just want to say also to all of you, I'm proud of every one of you, just to commit to this and to be on these calls and to get on and ask relevant questions and be involved. You're already a cut above. You're the kind of people we would want to work with. So, you know, pat yourselves on the back and say, hey, you stepped up, and that's important. It all starts right there. So give yourselves a pat on the back for that too.
Yeah, and Rod, thanks for saying that, because I'm also appreciative of the group and everybody's willingness to be transparent, whether that's via text with me, phone calls, or even on these calls, because I feel like I'm a part of your business to a certain degree. And there's not a single person on this call tonight, or member in our group, that I don't see their opportunity and ability to be successful in some of the things that we've talked about. So that should be a reminder for you. Stay after what you're doing, keep pushing. You know, I gave Raquel some kudos at the beginning of the call because, you know, she's stepping up her business. And now I'm excited to see what she's going to do to leverage her event, right, with William Shatner. And how does she grow her business from there? Not that she didn't already have a business, but, you know, these are steps all in the right direction. So Rod, thank you for bringing that up. Look forward to hearing from everybody. I'm back into full swing. Vacations and visits are over. So you may see some extra videos pop up for me on the back end, and hopefully you'll find them helpful and informative. And I'm here for you. And thank you everybody for being on the call. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks everybody.